Last week, Health Canada admitted that the Pfizer Covid vaccine contained a DNA sequence of SV40, that is the Simian virus, was from the 40th monkey virus that had been identified. Now, the FDA and the CDC have not said whether they knew about this. They haven't said if they knew that it was in the original COVID vaccines or if Pfizer is somehow keeping something from us. Joining us to discuss is Steve Kirsch. He's from the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. He's also a health blogger who's been following so many lies about the COVID vaccination program and the pandemic. So thank you so much for joining us. Can you explain why this revelation is important?
Yeah, it's the first time that a health authority anywhere in the world has acknowledged what Kevin McKernan, who's a research scientist, found and published back in April of this year, saying that in the Pfizer vaccine, there's an SV40 promoter sequence in that. And that's an active ingredient. It's not supposed to be there. Nobody has said anything about it's supposed to be there. It's not on the label anywhere for Pfizer. And to this point, no health authority had spoken out about it. So now at least we have one honest health authority in the entire world, which is Health Canada, which has confirmed that yes, that sequence is in there. That is what they are producing. And also, and they didn't admit this, but the documents that Pfizer provided to the FDA show that they deliberately removed the identification of SV40 from the documents that they handed to the FDA. And presumably, they removed this reference to the documents that they handed to every health authority in the world. Now, only Health Canada has acknowledged this, and they don't seem to be too upset about it. And all the authorities that I've talked to are extremely upset about it because it is an active ingredient, and we don't know what the repercussions are. So it could be completely de minimis, but the people I've talked to say that that is very unlikely. Now, we don't know the extent of what the implications of this. Is this going to impact the health? What's the clinical significance of this? Is this going to impact the health of hundreds of thousands of people, of millions of people? And in what way? Is it going to be a minor impact? Is it going to be a major impact? Is this going to be spread to future generations as well? There are a lot of unanswered questions here. And there are people who are saying, oh, no, this is nothing to worry about here, folks,
Right. Let me just bring you one example of this from a Twitter or X user named Philip Buchholz, saying it's just the SV40 promoter, not the cancer-causing SV40T antigen. It's not a cancer accelerator. The sequence is a standard bit of molecular biology engineering, and it's been used for decades. Now, I wonder just how they know that when we talked about this story yesterday, the story of Bernice Eddy, who found that the Salk vaccine, the Salk polio vaccine, had SV40 and was causing tumors in hamsters. And she was told, don't publish that. She lost her lab for publishing that and was demoted and moved to a different lab. So this shows just how much there is no appetite for studying the components of a vaccine. So do we know that, it's just the antigen or it's fine? Where's the research to show that?
Well, what we know is that it's just the promoter sequence, which is a smaller sequence than the entire virus. So this time they didn't include the entire virus into the vaccine. They just included this relatively small sequence that is part of SV40. Now, what this does is it enables essentially DNA to get into cells. So the question really is how significant this is, because we have never, ever had this delivered in lipid nanoparticles into people's cells all over their body. And so there is no precedent for this. And anyone who tells you there is a precedent for this and they know what's going to happen is lying to you. So the bottom line is we don't know. And it's important for us to find out. And we have to do that with careful experiments. Now, we cannot depend on any government or any health authority anywhere in the world to do these experiments. So they have to be privately funded in research labs where essentially they're being done under the radar so that the authorities don't try to shut it down. Because, as you know, with public health, it's the job of the public to protect the public from the governments. It used to be the reverse when I was younger, and I'm certainly very quickly discovering the truth that they're not interested. There's no excuse. This was brought up in public, widely discussed, widely known back in April of 2023, and the governments should have been saying, whoa, wait a second, you're right, we confirm this in the sequence. It takes minutes to confirm this in the sequence that Pfizer gave the FDA. They should have confirmed it, that this is correct. They should have also realized that this sequence is in the lipid nanoparticles. And so it's inserted into every one of these cells. And this is a huge, huge problem. And it's an even bigger problem that nobody's saying anything. And not only is nobody saying anything, but nobody's doing anything. So when Health Canada said, yeah, you're right, this is in there, they didn't say, hey, wait a second, hold on, stop using the vaccine for now. If you don't have like an urgent need to get vaccinated, maybe you should hold off.
Right.
They're not even doing that. They're not even doing the basic the precautionary principle of medicine says, hey, when you have something like this, which looks like it could be pretty explosive, where you talk to experts and they say, and you get mixed opinions, right?
Sure.
You'll talk to some experts and say, nothing to see here, folks. This is common sequence, blah, blah, blah.
But that's just what it is. It's an opinion because there's a refusal to study it.
It's an opinion. It's an opinion. It's not based on any data. And
right.
That's the point. Where is the data? Show me the data, the studies that were done where these fragments are in lipid nanoparticles that are injected into people's bodies into billions and billions of copies. And by the way, there is a specification that the regulators have of contamination, of DNA contamination in these vials. And they're supposed to be a very small, it's under 10 nanograms per dose of DNA fragments that are allowed in these vaccines. Now, if you measure it one way, which is very not sensitive, which is this quantitative PCR test, the vaccines meet the standard. But if you measure it a different way with fluorometry, then what happens is you find that the standard is exceeded by orders of magnitude. So here's the question. I don't think they specified how this is supposed to be measured. So by any objective standard, by any objective measure, the contamination is there. It is in at a much higher rate than as desired by the regulators, as specified by the regulators. But I don't think the regulators specified how it should be measured. Should it be measured accurately, or should it be measured inaccurately by a technique which undercounts the amount of contamination? Now, there is, some people point out, look, there's evidence that The regulators use quantitative PCR to measure this, which is the way to measure it such that you don't get the accurate count. And so they could argue that, well, the regulators are actually, they meant to say that it should be measured using the inaccurate method rather than the accurate method. Now, where did the regulators say that?
Right.
You're making an assumption. I think that
Yeah.
it could also be argued, on the other hand, that maybe the regulators didn't realize that there was a difference in the measurement techniques that they used versus what should be used in this case, and that it would exceed their standards. Now, the only way to find out that question is to ask a regulator, and of course, the regulators aren't asking or aren't answering any questions, and they're not going to respond to you or to anyone else. And the
Right.
mainstream media is certainly not going to ask them that question. So we're never going to really know the answer to that question because they don't want to talk about this.
Now, something
I
that,
think their whole-
you've said, though, what I totally agree with you, we're not going to get government response on this, but something that you're sort of putting your faith or hope in is litigation. You think that if the FDA is dragged into litigation, then they'll have to admit, did they know this or didn't they? If Pfizer is dragged into litigation, they will too. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, certainly when you have jurisdiction over them because you have a lawsuit that has not been dismissed, then you get to do things like discovery. And when you do discovery, that means depositions, which means that they're required to answer questions. And this is the only way that we can actually get our questions answered is through lawsuits and asking the questions like, what did you know about this? What did you do? What actions were taken to assess the harm here? Why wasn't any action taken to assess the harms? Why didn't you ask Pfizer why they deliberately moved the SV40 promoter sequence from the documents that they handed to you? What is the explanation for that? And then you can ask them questions like, why is some of these things are very strange that when people look at these sequences, they find that there are things that in there that should not be there in a production vaccine. And why are they there? And it's probably because, well, we took some shortcuts and we took this research vehicle that we had on the shelf, and we just used that and deployed it because we were in such a rush, rather than to actually design something that is fit for purpose, meaning that this is something that we designed to inject into people as a therapy, as opposed to inject into animals for research studies where we have a whole bunch of things going on that really shouldn't be there.
Okay. So do you think that, and I'm with you on that, I think that we litigate our values, and our value should be transparency, to know what we were given without informed consent. So is this something that is possibly a class action, do you think? Or
Yes.
do you think
Absolutely.
You do. The problem with
no
that
question.
is that, Pfizer could just settle and we wouldn't ever get answers. So we need the right litigation team to push this beyond settlement, right? What do you think of that?
Yeah. There's just because you can sue for anything, right? It doesn't mean
Sure.
that you're going to win. It doesn't mean that your case is going to go on and not be dismissed, right? So you could always sue Pfizer, right? But you'll probably end up losing, and if you did it today, you probably end up losing as well. But there are things going on in America. So, for example, attorney Aaron Siri has brought a case which, if it's successful, and he believes that will be successful, because if he didn't believe that, he wouldn't be wasting his time bringing the case. He thinks he can take down the protections that are granted in the legislation that is designed to protect
The PrEP Act
Pfizer.
is what you're talking
The
about.
PrEP Act.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so once that happens, then of course all bets are off. Then we don't even have to worry about whether this promoter sequence is in there. But there was a case in Chicago where a patient was injected with remdesivir that was contaminated with glass particles, ground up glass particles. And so what happened was there was a defect in the manufacturing process where a glass vial got accidentally put into a machine and got crushed up and put in vaccine vials.
Oh, that's how that happened. Okay.
Yeah. So Moderna, to its credit, notified everybody that, oh, we messed up. We're doing a recall of this. But not everybody got the word. So some people got injected with remdesivir. Sorry, did I say I said Moderna? I meant Gilead.
Gilead,
So,
right.
So Gilead, to their credit, they notified the hospitals, but this hospital somehow didn't get the message for whatever means. This vial was injected into a human being, causing the clotting. The judge ruled that the liability protection doesn't protect the manufacturer. So Gilead, in this case, is not protected and can be sued because there's foreign material that is not supposed to be in the vials. So the question is, because they deliberately covered it up and said to the FDA, no, can't identify any gene sequences here because they deliberately removed them. The question is whether that is now considered adulteration of the vaccine because this promoter sequence, which is an active ingredient, is in the vaccine. It was not on the label. The FDA didn't know about it. Okay. So what the FDA approved is different than what you received, and that's known as adulteration. Now, the FDA itself can take action on this. So they can say, better warn the public, let's write a letter to the manufacturer, let's stick a warning label on it, or let's recall the product. Now, there are a variety of other things they can do, but those are some of the main things that the FDA is allowed to do. Now, the FDA is also permitted to do absolutely nothing. So if there's contamination in there and they think that not a problem, they can do absolutely nothing.
Right. We talked about
that's what they're doing based on no evidence.
And they are allowed to, for instance, we learned from the book Dope Sick that FDA regulators and big pharma had been holding these private meetings, developing what they called enriched enrollment, where they allowed drug companies to weed out people from their studies who didn't respond well to their drugs, therefore tipping the balance towards FDA approval. So we know from precedents that the FDA is in bed with the hand that feeds them, I guess, is a way to put it. So we can't really expect them to hold Pfizer's feet to the fire. So it's on us then to litigate against the FDA if that's even possible.
Yes, and you can petition the FDA to do the proper actions, and the FDA has a long time to respond to that, and then they can choose not to take action, and then you can file a writ of mandamus in the court to force them to take action. But the court can also then say, well, look, what the law says is that the FDA is permitted to make the decision on that. They clearly decided to not take any action. So I can force them to follow the law, but the law says that they have the option. And so it's not even clear that even if you got a writ of mandamus and the judge, that it would be granted, because, or that even if it was granted, that it would make any difference because the law says that the FDA is allowed to have contaminants in. So if there's arsenic in the vaccines at a toxic level, the FDA can basically decide to do nothing. And you can petition the FDA and they can do nothing. Then you could try to get a court to overrule them, which would be hard because the courts like to defer to the FDA because they know what they're doing. Or that's what the judges think.
This is what philosopher Thomas Saz warned about pharmacracy. It's the expansion of government power through medical emergencies, and it's disenfranchising us all. So thank you for following this. I encourage you to follow Steve Kirsch's Twitter or X feed because he's following this so acutely. It's amazing. Also, is it public that, where do your blogs, are they on? I'm sorry, remind us.
So I have Substack.
Substack.
Where I do most
Thank
of my
you.
writings. I've written about 1,500 articles. SteveKirsch.substack.com, or also KirschSubstack.com is another way to get to it.
Okay.
And on Twitter, I'm St. Kirsch.
Okay. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Natali.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.